The Rise of Drake from Toronto, Kid to King of Hip Hop. Part 1, Roots in Toronto, The Making of Aubrey. Aubrey Drake Graham was born on October 24th, 1986, in Toronto, Canada. To some, this date is just a birthday, but to millions of fans worldwide, it's the beginning of one of the most fascinating journeys in modern music history. Drake didn't come from a silver spoon. He didn't grow up in the glamorous spotlight of Los Angeles or New York. His story starts in a modest neighborhood, raised in a family that reflected two worlds. His father, Dennis Graham, an African-American musician from Memphis, and his mother, Sandra Sandy Graham, a Canadian Jewish woman who worked as an educator. His father, a drummer who once played with Jerry Lee Lewis, had rhythm and music flowing through his veins. But Dennis struggled with consistency, facing legal troubles and time away from the family. Drake's mother, by contrast, was steady. She raised Aubrey primarily in Toronto's Forest Hill neighborhood, where he attended school, experienced both comfort and struggle, and began shaping his identity. You might not notice it right away, but by simply listening to this story, you're practicing English. The rhythm, the tone, and the pauses, this is exactly how Native American speakers communicate. Every minute you listen, your ear is getting sharper. As a child, Drake was shy but observant. He watched, listened, and absorbed the energy around him. He often spoke about how his mother's illnesses, she struggled with health issues, kept him close to home, giving him time to dream and to imagine. It was in those quiet Toronto nights that a young Aubrey Graham started to build worlds in his head. Growing up biracial in Toronto during the late 80s and 90s wasn't easy. Drake would later speak about how he often felt like an outsider, too black in some circles, too white in others. He carried this sense of not fully belonging throughout his youth, and it would later bleed into his music, a mixture of vulnerability and bravado, of soul-bearing honesty wrapped in confidence. And then came acting. At just 15 years old, Drake landed a role that would change his life, though not in the way most expected. He became Jimmy Brooks on Degrassi, The Next Generation, a Canadian teen drama series. To outsiders, it looked like a big break. TV fame, steady work, recognition. But for Drake, Degrassi was both a blessing and a burden. He had to navigate being recognized as the kid in the wheelchair, while deep inside his true dream was music. By day, Aubrey was Jimmy Brooks. By night, he was Drake, the aspiring rapper recording rhymes, experimenting with sounds, and plotting a different kind of stardom. At school, kids teased him for acting. In the rap scene, people doubted him because of it. But Drake carried both identities, refusing to let one cancel out the other. That balance, between the perception of others and his internal vision, would become a constant theme in his life. Toronto in the early 2000s wasn't seen as a hub for global hip-hop. American rap dominated, and Canadian artists struggled to break through. But Drake wasn't intimidated. He studied Jay-Z, admired Kanye West's innovation, and learned the storytelling techniques of legends like Nas. He blended that influence with the emotional openness he felt comfortable sharing, and soon he was writing verses that sounded different, softer in tone, but sharper in meaning. By the time his teenage years ended, Aubrey Drake Graham was standing at a crossroads. He had tasted fame through television, but he knew his destiny was not acting. It was music, and the world was about to hear from him. Part 2, Degrassi Days and the Birth of Drake. For most kids, landing a regular role on a TV show would be the dream. For Aubrey, Degrassi was a stepping stone. Playing Jimmy Brooks, a high school basketball player who becomes paralyzed after a shooting, gave him visibility. The show tackled social issues, race, disability, relationships, and it resonated deeply with teens. But for Drake, it also became a label he couldn't shake. Everywhere he went, people saw Jimmy, not Aubrey. Behind the scenes, though, Drake was living a double life. When filming Wrapped, he wasn't hanging out on sets or chasing acting roles. Instead, he was writing verses, networking with producers, and slowly carving a lane in music. Acting paid the bills, barely. In fact, when the show cut his pay during certain seasons, he and his mother struggled to make ends meet. He would later reveal moments where they couldn't even afford the basics, like heating in the winter. The glamorous life people assumed he had was an illusion. But struggle breeds hunger. Drake poured his energy into creating mixtapes. His first attempt, Room for Improvement, 2006, was raw. Recorded with borrowed beats and local producers, it was less about polish and more about presence. Drake wanted to prove he wasn't just another Canadian kid pretending to rap. He wanted authenticity. He sold a few thousand copies, enough to create buzz in Toronto's underground scene. Then came Comeback Season, 2007. This mixtape was different. The sound was cleaner, his voice more confident, and it contained a track that changed everything. Replacement Girl, featuring Trey Songz. The music video caught attention not just in Toronto, but across borders. Suddenly, Drake wasn't just the kid from Degrassi. He was a rapper with potential. But even with momentum, there were doubts. American hip-hop was skeptical of Canadian rappers. Labels hesitated. Executives questioned whether a biracial, half-Jewish actor could really sell rap records. But Drake kept pushing. He networked tirelessly, often sending music to industry insiders, hoping for a breakthrough. That breakthrough came when a copy of his music landed in the hands of Lil Wayne. Wayne then, at the peak of his powers, saw something in Drake that others missed. He invited him to join the Young Money camp, even flying him out on tour. For Drake, this was validation. He was no longer hustling on the outside. He was inside the circle of one of rap's biggest stars. From that point forward, Aubrey Graham the actor began fading. Drake the rapper was rising, and the mixtape era was about to reach its climax with a project that would rewrite hip-hop's future. Part 3, So Far Gone, The Breakthrough. In 2009, Drake released So Far Gone, the mixtape that would propel him from underground hopeful to mainstream star. It wasn't just music, it was a manifesto. With tracks like Best I Ever Had and Successful, Drake introduced the world to a new sound, a blend of rap and R&B where vulnerability was not weakness but power. The mixtape spread like wildfire online, an early example of the internet's role in shaping modern stars. Blogs, forums, and social media amplified it. Suddenly, Drake wasn't just Toronto's secret, he was hip-hop's next big thing. Best I Ever Had climbed the charts. Successful, featuring Trey Songz and Lil Wayne, became an anthem for ambition. Critics praised the honesty, the relatability. Drake wasn't posturing as a gangster or exaggerating a persona. He was rapping about late nights, self-doubt, relationships, and the pursuit of dreams. For an audience tired of cliches, it felt fresh. Major labels scrambled to sign him. A bidding war ensued. But in the end, Drake stayed loyal to Lil Wayne and joined Young Money Entertainment, alongside artists like Nicki Minaj and Tyga. With that move, he stepped onto a bigger stage, and hip-hop would never be the same. Part 4, Thank Me Later, Stepping into the Spotlight. By 2010, Drake had something no one could ignore: momentum. His mixtape, So Far Gone, wasn't just popular, it was a cultural event. Now the question wasn't if he would drop an album, it was how big the impact would be. That summer, Drake released his debut studio album, Thank Me Later. The title itself carried a message: confidence, even cockiness. Drake knew he had delivered something special, and he was telling the world, don't doubt me, you'll see. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling nearly 500,000 copies in its first week. That's not normal for a debut, that's a statement. With features from Alicia Keys, Nicki Minaj, Jay-Z, and Lil Wayne, Drake had the cosigns of giants. But beyond the star-studded lineup, what stood out most was Drake's unique voice. He wasn't afraid to rap about insecurity, heartbreak, or ambition in the same breath. Songs like Over became anthems, while Find Your Love showcased his willingness to embrace melody. Hip-hop purists raised eyebrows. Was Drake singing too much? But the audience? They loved it. Women gravitated to the emotional honesty, men found resonance in the ambition, and suddenly Drake wasn't just a rapper, he was a superstar. Toronto celebrated him as their own, but his reach stretched far beyond Canada. He was becoming the face of a new era in hip-hop, one where vulnerability and introspection stood alongside bravado and dominance. The balance was risky, but Drake pulled it off, and the industry realized something important. This wasn't a fad. Drake was here to stay, but superstardom is heavy. The glare of fame revealed pressures he'd never faced before: criticism, comparison, and expectation. Some doubted his longevity, calling him an emo rapper. Others accused him of leaning too much on features. But Drake wasn't rattled. He was already plotting his next evolution. Part 5. Take Care, Defining a Generation. If Thank Me Later introduced Drake, his second album, Take Care, 2011, cemented him. This wasn't just an album. It was a cultural landmark. Drake dove deep into themes of love, loneliness, excess, and fame's hollowness. With Noah 40 Shabab crafting atmospheric beats, moody, minimalist, almost underwater in sound, Take Care created a world. Songs like Marvin's Room redefined vulnerability in hip-hop. It wasn't brash or aggressive. It was late-night calls, heartbreak, and raw emotion. The title track, Take Care, featuring Rihanna, became iconic, blending intimacy with global appeal. And tracks like Headlines and The Motto proved Drake could still deliver swagger when needed. In fact, it was the motto that popularized the phrase YOLO, you only live once, a term that defined a generation. Critics hailed Take Care as Drake's masterpiece. Fans connected on a personal level. For many young listeners navigating relationships, ambition, and self-doubt, this album felt like a soundtrack to their lives. Drake wasn't a distant celebrity. He was the voice in their headphones, speaking the words they couldn't. The album won the Grammy Award for Best Rap Album and sold millions worldwide. But more importantly, it positioned Drake as more than just a star. He was a cultural leader. His ability to be both vulnerable and powerful made him untouchable. From this point on, Drake wasn't chasing the spotlight. He was the spotlight. Part 6. Nothing Was the Same. Evolution of a Titan. By 2013, Drake faced a new challenge. How do you follow up an era-defining album? The answer was Nothing Was the Same, and the title said it all. This project was sharper, more focused, more confident. Where Take Care had explored vulnerability, Nothing Was the Same leaned into ambition. Songs like Started from the Bottom became anthems of perseverance, a mantra not just for Drake, but for anyone who felt underestimated. The track was raw, repetitive, almost minimalist in lyrics, but the message was undeniable. Other tracks like Hold On, We're Going Home blurred genres, proving Drake's pop appeal. He wasn't just dominating hip-hop, he was dominating music, period. Think of this not just as Drake's story, but as your lesson too. Every time you hear these sentences, you're learning how words connect, how emotions shape pronunciation, and how natural English really sounds. This is better than memorizing rules. It's living the language. The album reflected Drake's evolution. He was no longer trying to prove he belonged. He was cementing his throne. His storytelling had matured, his delivery was sharper, and his production choices created a soundscape that defined the mid-2000s and 10s. And once again, fans connected. Drake wasn't rapping about fictional lives. He was talking about emotions, struggles, triumphs that felt real. That authenticity became his weapon, one no critic could strip away. Part 7. If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. The mixtape that shook the industry. In 2015, without warning, Drake dropped If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. It wasn't marketed as an album, but as a mixtape. Yet its impact was seismic. This project marked a darker, edgier side of Drake. Gone were the soft melodies. This was aggressive, assertive, unapologetic. Tracks like Energy and Know Yourself carried a different weight. The now famous line, running through the six with my woes, became a cultural phenomenon. The mixtape blurred the line between projects. It sold like an album, streamed like a blockbuster, and shook the industry model. Drake had proven that he could bypass traditional marketing and still dominate. He was no longer just an artist. He was a movement. This release also fueled whispers. Was Drake beefing with others in the industry? Was this his way of staking territory? Whatever the case, one thing was clear. Drake had entered a new phase. He was no longer just speaking for fans. He was declaring war on the industry's old rules. Part 8. Views. Owning the global stage. 2016 brought views, and with it, Drake's full arrival as a global megastar. Anchored by the massive hit Hotline Bling, the album was everywhere. The project paid homage to Toronto with the iconic cover of Drake sitting atop the CN Tower. Songs like One Dance and Controlla infused Caribbean and Afro-beat influences, proving Drake's versatility. He wasn't just a rapper, he was shaping global soundscapes. Views became a commercial juggernaut, topping charts worldwide. One Dance hit #1 in multiple countries, cementing Drake as not just North America's star, but a global icon. Critics were mixed. Some felt the album was too long, too moody, but fans didn't care. They streamed it endlessly, making Drake one of the most streamed artists of all time. Drake had done it. He was no longer just representing Toronto. He was representing the world. Part 9. More Life. The Playlist Revolution. In 2017, Drake introduced something new. Not an album, not a mixtape, but a playlist called More Life. It was a deliberate attempt to break traditional molds, and it worked. More Life blended genres, Afrobeat, dancehall, grime, R&B, trap, into a seamless journey. It featured global artists, giving exposure to voices beyond North America. Drake wasn't just consuming culture, he was curating it. As you follow along, notice how clear and natural the storytelling feels. If you repeat these sentences aloud, even slowly, your accent will improve and your confidence will grow. That's the beauty of listening. You don't just understand English, you begin to feel it. Tracks like Passion Fruit and Fake Love became instant favorites. The project's experimental nature showed Drake's willingness to take risks. He wasn't just chasing hits. He was expanding the definition of what a hip-hop star could be. By calling it a playlist, Drake signaled something bigger. Music was changing. Streaming was the future, and Drake was leading the way. He wasn't adapting. He was shaping the new rules. Part 10. Scorpion. Breaking records. 2018 brought Scorpion, a double album that was as ambitious as it was massive. Divided into two sides, one rap-heavy, one R&B driven, it showcased Drake's duality. The album spawned monster hits like God's Plan, whose video of Drake giving away nearly $1 million melted hearts worldwide. In My Feelings sparked viral dance challenges, while Nice for What became an empowerment anthem. But Scorpion was also shadowed by controversy. It was during this era that Drake faced one of his toughest battles, his feud with Pusha T, who revealed Drake had a secret son. The revelation shocked fans and critics alike. Drake, who had always been open in his music, now faced a narrative he hadn't controlled. Yet instead of collapsing, he confronted it. He confirmed the news on Scorpion with lines like, "I wasn't hiding my kid from the world. I was hiding the world from my kid." The honesty turned vulnerability into strength once again. Commercially, the album was unstoppable. Drake broke streaming records, dominated charts, and cemented his legacy as one of the most powerful artists of his generation. This is practice without stress. You're not in a classroom. You're not memorizing lists. You're hearing real, flowing English. By absorbing the words in stories like this, you'll naturally begin to think faster in English and sound more fluent when you speak. Part 11. The Legacy in Motion. By the end of the 2010s, Drake wasn't just an artist, he was an institution. From So Far Gone to Scorpion, he had evolved through every phase. The vulnerable kid, the ambitious rapper, the global superstar, the cultural curator. He had redefined what it meant to be a hip-hop artist. He blurred genres, broke rules, and spoke directly to listeners' hearts. Love him or hate him, one thing was undeniable. Drake had changed music. But here's the thing about Drake. His story isn't over. Each project, each era, feels like a chapter in a book that keeps expanding. As he once rapped, "I'm just saying you could do better." And with Drake, he always does. From Toronto Kid to King of Hip Hop, Aubrey Drake Graham has written a story that millions connect to. And as long as there are emotions to feel, ambitions to chase, and nights that demand a soundtrack, there will always be a place for his voice. And here's the best part. You didn't just learn about Drake's rise from Toronto Kid to global superstar. You also trained your ear, your accent, and your fluency. Each story you listen to sharpens your English and brings you one step closer to sounding like a native speaker.